Hello and good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining from this broadcast. It's so good to have you here. My name is Christina.charenkova, and today I have an incredible guest. Her name is Lorraine. Lorraine
Yay.
Lee. She is a fellow LinkedIn Learning instructor. That's how Lorraine and I met. And I love bringing these chats to you guys in the LinkedIn community. Um, we, as part of LinkedIn Learning instructors, have this awesome opportunity to meet and to talk about ideas and how to make your lives, your working lives, a little bit easier. Hopefully, give you some of our tips and tricks and insights and frameworks and approaches to how you can do things better. Um, before I give Lorraine a proper time to introduce herself and say hello to everyone on the stream, I just wanted to say a few words. If you haven't met me before, as I said, I deal with change, business transformation, strategy, business analysis, and anything in between. Change has sort of been in my narrative for most of my corporate career. I sort of grew up in the management consulting space and then had numerous roles in industry. And then I had this awesome opportunity to become a LinkedIn Learning instructor and share some of that knowledge with you guys. So I'm really thrilled that you have chosen to spend your time and attention here. And if you're watching this as a replay, please make sure that you drop any questions or comments down below, and Lorraine and I will both come back to those. Now, if you're live here with us and would like to take part in this conversation, actually would love you to be part of this conversation, please make sure that you give us your questions in the comments and say hello, where you dialing in from. And yes, really pleased to have you here, guys. Now, without further ado, Lorraine, please introduce yourself to the
Yes,
audience.
thank you for having me, Christina. Hello, everyone. I'm Lorraine. I am so excited to be here on Christina's show. Always so fun to meet a fellow LinkedIn Learning instructor. A little bit about me. So I spent the first 10 years of my career leading editorial teams at tech companies. So I was a founding editor at LinkedIn before I was a LinkedIn Learning instructor. So I was there for 6 years. I was a founding editor at Prezi. And as of the last year and a half, I am a solopreneur. So I am a keynote speaker and trainer and an instructor with LinkedIn Learning and Stanford Continuing Studies. And sort of my topic of expertise is around the idea of professional presence. And when I say presence, I mean it in two senses of the word, both senses. So presence in terms of traditional things like executive presence, how Christina sees me, how I come across to her, but also presence in terms of where others see me and what is the impression and the reputation I leave behind on virtual channels like LinkedIn, on video calls, et cetera, because that's just as important, if not even more important, maybe now in this day and age, than sort of that impression we leave in person, because we don't always get that chance.
Yeah, that's right. And today's topic is quite close to this, I suppose, because in a way, any organization, any environment, even within the personal context, we all go through change. We all go through business transformation, be it in a business context or in a personal context. And having that ability to, I suppose, uh, start understanding how to build your presence and how to
Mhm.
maximize your presence, how to communicate better, to have a few frameworks at the back of your mind. If you're caught
Mhm.
off guard, you can always go back to and kind of go, oh, okay, now I know. So um, I think that applies in any given context. Now, of course, talking about business context, I suppose, um, with LinkedIn, a lot of our audience will be part of a organization that may be going through change, and change maybe because there's some sort of technological disruptions such as
Yeah,
AI, or maybe new
yeah.
system is changing. Then maybe because there's just the organization is changing
Yep.
direction, they're changing strategy. they may be downsizing, they may be looking to enter a new market, there may be
Oh,
some cultural movement towards more innovation or towards being a more technologically driven, customer focused, whatever those different contexts are.
yeah.
But if we sit in that chair, I suppose, and say I'm a new leader given a project to lead with a team that I hadn't worked with before, and as we know, a lot of the times now we also can work in a hybrid way. So
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
work from home, people are a lot on video calls on Zoom. Um, if you were to put yourself in that chair, Lorraine, in those
Mhm.
shoes of that new leader,
Yeah.
um, what do you think would be the first couple of things that come to your mind to go, I probably need to put that in place to make sure that I'm on a winning track here.
Well, first off, I just want to plus one what you said about how much change we're all going through right now, and especially
Yeah.
me being in tech. Oh my gosh, there is so much happening in this world right now. So, this is just a really important thing for everyone to sort of learn, and yeah, just it's a skill set, right? Adapting through change. So, to answer your question, probably the first thing I would say if I was coming in as a new leader for a new team or to implement some sort of new project, new change, is actually to connect with my team on a human level. So getting to know the people I'll be working
Mm,
with and them actually getting to know me. Of course, it's very easy when
that's
it's a high
important.
stakes situation, a lot of changes have to happen, and people are on deadlines and this and that. But I think fundamentally, business is built on relationships, and things happen and move forward because of those relationships you build. So to be able to connect with your team is going to be really critical. Oh, I think Christina, her internet jumped off. I will just continue. Thanks all for staying with me.
I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, no
Sorry.
worries, no worries. I'm still talking, so don't worry as you figure out your
As we're
internet.
talking about technological changes,
Yeah.
I'm going through one right now.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, we're showing it in action. So yeah, so the first thing would be, relationship building. I think the second thing that comes to mind that's really critical where not a lot of leaders maybe lean into this is the idea of transparency and being really clear when there are changes that might be seen in a negative way or that might make people unhappy, or even if it's a
Mm,
good change, it's really good to explain why you're doing something, what was the decision
yeah,
making process behind it.
yeah,
uh, people want to People are okay if you're honest with them. People are going to be much more okay with hearing negative news than if you're just pushing something onto them and they're like, okay, well, like, how did you come to this? So I think being really transparent is key, and people respect leaders who are transparent and willing to be vulnerable. um, the last thing I would say is that as a leader, if you are coming in again a new leader to a team, to be able to get buy-in from people and also to bring people into the process before you make any sort of major change. So to uh, give the team a heads up, as best as you can, to bring in additional stakeholders, other team leaders, to let them know, this might be coming. Can you help sort of prepare your teams for that? I think that preparation is also key if it's, if it makes sense depending on what's going on.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's so true. When you build that personal connection and personal understanding with your team, like everything seems to flow in a
Yeah,
completely, in a completely different manner.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I think working with teams sometimes whether you're a new leader in a new organization or you're a leader from the same organization but with a different team has got a
mm,
different cadence to
yeah,
it as well. So it's like taking the time to really understand the cadence of how your new team works. What is the culture of the team itself, because if you
yeah,
move
yeah,
from a different department, like maybe they have a slightly different culture to how we do things around here, so
yeah,
taking that time to really understand that and embed yourself in that culture and understand it and become part of it. I think it's key to some of those initial moments to solidify yourself as the new leader.
yeah, yeah,
And
completely.
Talking about leadership, I think I always find it fascinating to like go back to basics and get people's different descriptions, I suppose, of what that
Sure.
means. What does leadership mean to you?
That's such a good question. I think leadership is inspiring people to take action or yeah, I think inspiring people to take action, maybe feel a certain way, get excited about something, but it's really about bringing people along the journey with you towards a specific goal.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I love that. And I think to me, it also means having that common understanding of where we're going together as a team,
Yeah.
and building that common understanding is part of what we're talking today, I suppose. It's how to have clarity in the outcome that we're trying to achieve, but clarity in communicating the outcome as well. And as a leader, or even as someone who is talking about change, talking about business transformation, maybe not in a leadership context, but a lot of the times when we see change happening on the horizon and we hear that initial message that gets passed on to the next team or gets passed on to our next colleague, and it has our own interpretation in it. It's what I find.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when we're in the position of communicating that initial message, or crafting that initial communication, it has to be super clear, super, built to last in a way and built to be passed on in a way. Do you have
Yeah.
any tips or tricks of how would a person do that?
So the first thing, it was funny when you were saying that. It reminded me of the game Telephone, when everyone, like,
Yeah.
whispers in each other, and it just completely becomes something different
Yeah.
at the end. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is, um, something that my former CEO used to say is, especially in our virtual worlds, you need to repeat things 7 times in 7 different ways for people to really absorb the message and also even see it, right? Because virtually there are just so many distractions. Like, you might post the announcement in Slack, but I just,
Yeah.
there was 100 other messages, so I missed it that day. So it also needs to
Yeah.
be emailed. It needs to be in the company intranet. Your manager needs to be sharing out in your team meeting. So just making sure you simply repeat the message and make sure it's out there in multiple channels, I think is really
Yeah.
key. And then sort of similar to that point I made earlier about if you're a new leader coming in, sort of, preparing the team ahead of time, prepare your leadership team with the messaging, make sure
Mm,
that people, the leaders who others are looking towards for information, for updates, things like that, are well prepared to answer questions, are briefed on the change and what's
yeah.
happening, and briefed on the communication, and that they're ready and equipped to answer maybe difficult questions that might come their way. Because,
Mm.
yeah, anytime there's change, people get uncomfortable, and you're likely to receive some tough questions.
Yeah, I think we all get uncomfortable with change, and I think
Yeah,
that's normal. And
for sure. Yeah.
even for me, who has been in the context of change for many years, even when I have change happening, I get uncomfortable, and I recognize the process, and I go, "Oh, okay, I'm at this stage now. I sort of need to go step by step
Yeah.
and take
Yeah.
it." Yeah, I love that. The 7 ways you have to say one message. And I suppose thinking about the workplace and, where we see messages now,
Mhm.
there's lots of different channels, right? So it's utilizing those different channels and making
Yeah.
sure that you communicate to where people are. For example, I've been involved in a project to revamp a company intranet, and I know this is one of the
Oh,
things you
wow.
mentioned. But
Yeah.
what we found, for example, is that nobody was using the company intranet. And
Yeah.
even though the internal communications team was posting messages there for people to see, they weren't really on the company intranet. So it
Yeah.
may be that there's a corporate social media platform. It
Yeah.
may be that people are more doing lunch and learns, or they're more having the messages through their direct boss or direct manager. So kind of understanding that, I think, is key to also make sure that the people are really hearing the message and it's not just hearsay. And like you say, from that game,
Yeah, and
You know.
I feel like probably that company you're working with was probably like, "Oh my gosh," like, that was probably such an eye opener for them to realize that, "Oh my gosh, someone's reading our messages." That was probably like, I mean, I'm sure they, like, were so excited when you shared that. I mean, just like, wow, they now know to shift some things around, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think the other side was, you spend such a long time working on doing this transformation project, and then you kind of go back and say, hold on a minute, did anyone actually find out if this is something that would add value? And
Right, yeah.
thinking about that bigger perspective, bigger picture, stepping back and kind of going, what are the different pieces that would add value to this organizational landscape?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, it's interesting. We all get involved in projects, and we all get in maybe sometimes some interesting insights to those projects. Um, Today, we're talking about professional presence and optimizing your professional presence. Now, I know one of the topics that you are really good at speaking on is how to optimize your LinkedIn presence. Is this part of professional presence? Is this part of this, I'm on a project or I'm a new leader? Would you recommend that people look at their LinkedIn profiles as well within that context, or would it just be what's happening within the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think LinkedIn is actually a huge part of it now. And I mean, I don't know about you, Christina, like you go on someone's LinkedIn and you want to find out. A lot of people, I think, actually go to LinkedIn now to find out more about the person, versus a
Yeah,
personal website. And if you, Christina, had like no profile picture or like you didn't have an
yeah.
about or like things were missing, I'm going
Mm,
to form an impression of you based on your LinkedIn presence. And I'm going to think,
yeah.
oh, Christina's not super credible or maybe she doesn't have it together, right? And that's obviously not true, but like that's how I'm judging you, right? So just looking at your LinkedIn presence. So
Yes.
I think it's huge. And it's not just for looking for jobs anymore, right? Like
Mm,
it is so powerful in also helping how others perceive you within a company.
yeah.
I know personally, like I started posting on LinkedIn more after I left LinkedIn, and people within the company, they were just so impressed. They saw me as just sort of like more of like an influencer, right? The fact that I was comfortable, willing to put my thoughts and ideas out
Mm,
there. And subsequently, that also led to opportunities that gave me more visibility within the company. For example,
yeah.
people would invite me to be on podcasts or to speak or to be interviewed for articles. And that's all stuff that, makes the company look great too, right? To have an
Yeah,
employee sort of out
fantastic.
there and free
Yeah.
advertising for the company, right? So absolutely, I think the two go hand in hand. It is no longer just for looking for jobs. If you're posting on LinkedIn, I don't think the assumption should be that you're looking for jobs, but rather you are trying to build that presence, you're trying to build that visibility and stay top of mind. To your point, a lot of change happens. You don't know when things
Yeah,
are gonna go,
yeah,
in the wrong direction as well. So it's really great. It's the one thing that you have, your brand, that's all yours and it will stick with you wherever you choose to go.
yeah. And I suppose, yeah, it's building that personal brand as well. Like you say, it's
Yeah.
showing a bigger part of you,
Mhm.
bringing your whole self to whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
um, which is so important nowadays. And yeah, you're right. Like totally, whenever a new person joins a team or something happens, I think a lot of us now go on LinkedIn or they Google the person and kind of go, "Oh, I wonder what they've been up to.
Yeah, no,
Let me just
exactly.
have a
Yeah.
quick
Who is this
look."
person? Yeah.
so, so yeah, that's awesome. And what about internally? What are your kind of top three tips that you can give to people about maximizing presence internally within an organization? So, you
Mhm.
know,
I think the first thing I would say, and it's probably the simplest thing, is to do an audit of all the virtual touch points that you have most often in a given day. So there's not too many, right? We have email, we have chat,
mm,
um, video calls, right? And your presence in all those places, while they might feel small, on its own, they add up to really add to your presence overall. So things like your email signature. Does your email have a
yeah,
profile photo? Does your chat channel have a profile photo? Like, right? Like, I will now associate you, Christina, with that picture of you versus like the letter C, right? So just like those little upgrades, again, like
Yeah, right.
each on their own feels small, but added up, it's like, oh, this whole thing sort of is consistent. It makes sense. And I think that's major for your presence. The second thing I would say
Yeah.
is, yeah, making sure that you're really active in talking about your work and promoting your work. And I think a lot of people sort of cringe when they hear like self-promotion because they think, "Oh, I have to be really sort of like braggy and just talking about myself all the time." But it's not that. I think it's important to make your work known, especially if we're virtual or hybrid, right? We're not getting as much in-person
Mm,
interaction. And so something I always say is you have to be the CEO of your own career. You have to be really intentional with every single thing.
yeah.
You can't just expect your hard work, your really good work, which, it's great, but your really good work, what's it all for if no one sees it? So that's
Mm,
the second thing I would say is just to make sure that your work is being visible and that you are being visible. And the third thing I would say is to work on your video presence because, again, many of us have video calls. That's, like, the only Christine and I were, like, finicking with our with our lighting before, we hopped on this call, but just to make sure you're showing up well excuse me, you're showing up well, you look professional, um, you're not in a dark room with, like, a grainy camera, you're taking up, the screen, it's not like you're, like, a small head or you're, like, a giant head, right? So, again, small adjustments that have really big
yeah.
impact, and again,
Yeah.
like, on its own, it
Fantastic.
might feel like, "Oh, it's not gonna make a difference," but altogether, like, I've had so many people who, will say to me I'll get on a call with them, and they're like, "Wow, the whole, like, process before meeting you was very consistent. Like the emails that you sent out were like very
Mm,
it's like the email content, the tone, like the preview I have on the video before I get onto the video call. Just so like all those touch points. And then by the time people meet me, they're like, oh yeah, like I have this great impression of you. And it's also consistent with everything else I've seen, right?
oh,
So
fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that, talk about your work. And we've got a really good question from Jana that says, Lorraine, can you please give a simple scenario of promoting your work?
Yes, definitely. So there's three ways that I like to frame promoting your work that I think can feel more authentic and a little less braggy, if you will. So the first thing is to frame your work and what you've done in terms of learnings and wins, or even just learnings,
Mhm.
for example. So anytime you
Yeah.
can say, "All right, we did this, and what we learned was XYZ. We learned that, headlines, email headlines that start with how to perform better. So you're still talking about the work you did and you're providing a learning that can help a different team, right? Like, for example, the blog team now knows, oh, maybe
Mhm.
blog title should start with how to, if that's what's resonating with people. So framing
Yeah.
it as learnings, I think it's just great. Everyone wants to learn how to do better, right? And better work.
Yeah,
So
that's
that first framing I think is really helpful. The second thing is just to ground everything in facts and data. No one can argue with facts and data. If you increased revenue by 30%, I mean, that's a fact, right? You're not bragging,
mm.
you're just simply
Yeah.
stating the data, and of
Yeah.
course, an executive wouldn't want to know, any sort of facts or data that, tied to the company's bottom line, right? So that would be the
Yeah.
second thing. And then the third thing I would say is think about the language you're using. So there's actually been research and studies done that show that when you use more collaborative language, like we, like us,
Mm.
you're actually seen as more of a leader. You're seen as more collaborative. When you use I statements, you are actually seen as more junior. So
Yeah.
simple language tweaks can make a big difference as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And then I think the other thing is just practicing talking about your work as well.
Yeah.
Just to build on your top three. I think because whatever we practice, it becomes easier and easier. So maybe
Yeah.
the first few times it may be a little bit tricky. You might need to practice it by yourself, or even practice it with ChatGPT, whatever is your tool of choice, or practice it with a colleague. And then once you've done it a few more times, you refine it and you become better, and it sort of
Yeah.
becomes like second nature almost, right?
Yeah.
So I think practicing speaks to a lot of things. Um, Using the language, I really like that third point about using the language or consistently using we versus I, because of course people want to co-create and people want to be part of a solution rather than, me, I'm the leader, or I've done this and nobody else was helping me. At the end of the day, we all get help. None of us could do what we do by ourselves. So
Yeah,
it's nice
exactly,
to
and
recognize, I think, the
yeah.
effort of others and to invite them to be part of that.
Yeah, and when I was
Um,
a manager, I would just even if I had a big part in something, I just wouldn't even talk
yeah,
about it. I'd be like, "Christina did such a good job on this," and people know I was involved, but I don't need to take credit for it, right? And people appreciate, and
yeah,
my teammates certainly appreciates that I'm sort of giving them that visibility. So that, in a secondhand way, gives me visibility, but also, like, your team wants to get celebrated, they wanna feel appreciated, so that's just, I guess another way to be a great leader.
yeah, yeah, fantastic. Um, I love that. And I think the other tricky moment comes when you have to share difficult news or you have to share something that the team won't like. However many times you practice that, or whatever framework you
Yeah,
you build around this, it's going to be a difficult message.
yeah.
Um, do you have any tips that could potentially help people with difficult messaging? How do you ease the pain?
Mhm. I think when it comes to sharing difficult messages, whether it's something more extreme, like you have to lay someone off, or it's simply, some constructive feedback, I think the best thing to do is to be direct and to be empathetic. Too many
Yeah.
people try to couch things, the shit sandwich, excuse my language, to try to make the other person feel better. But what it ends up
Yeah.
doing is just confusing them, or they don't hear the message, or they hear the message and they also think, okay, anything nice you're saying is very disingenuous because you're just using it to cushion the actual news. So I think, as direct as you can be while also being empathetic, treating them like, a person, understanding that it might be difficult. Maybe you even preface the news, right? So Adam Grant,
Yeah.
um, I learned this idea from Adam Grant, which was really great, which is when you're sharing difficult news with a team member, for example, you might start it with, I'm sharing this with you, this maybe difficult feedback or constructive feedback with you because uh, I see a lot of potential in you and I believe that you can reach it. So even like just as framing it like that, right? Showing like, okay, giving the heads up, this is coming, but also this is why I'm sharing this with you. I believe in you. Like I
Mm.
feel like that is a really great framing.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so I think that, yeah, those would be kind of my thoughts around
Mm.
difficult news, yeah.
Yeah. And I think also, sticking with that person through the journey. So you might share some
Yeah,
feedback, like you were saying, about maybe that they need to improve their communication skills, or they may improve their video presence, or whatever it may be, maybe presentation.
you got muted. I like where your thought was going.
As I'm grappling with my technological change at home. Ah, this is fantastic. So I got a new piece of equipment, which I thought would make my life easier. Isn't it always the case? I've tested it a number of times on a few other conversations, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, it always happens during the worst times, no worries.
um, but yeah,
It cut out again. Okay, I think, Christina, I'll finish your thought. I think I know what you were trying to say, is that when, you bring people along for the ride, right, you ask them, like, how might you be able to what ideas do you have for maybe how to improve in the future? What can I do to help? Um,
yeah.
is that what you're okay, what gonna say?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I suppose coming up with a little plan, I was gonna say, come
yeah,
up with a little plan and say, "I'm here for you
yeah,
to improve those things
yeah,
together. We're
yeah.
we're part of a team and we're working together." So the fact that you would improve means our whole team gets better at this.
Ah,
And
I
I
love that.
think that builds that kind of resilience and presence for you, not only as an individual, but also as a team. And yeah, I really stick by that notion. At the end of the day, none of us can achieve much by ourselves. We all need people around us. We all need teams around us. So building that togetherness for me is, one of my, I suppose, teachings that I want to relay out there in the world, co-creating change, not within an organization, but within a team, within our skills, growing together as a team.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Um, Okay, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to anyone who's on the live broadcast and would love to ask Lorraine or me a question. Please drop those by. If you're watching this as a replay and you've seen me drop out a few times, do not worry. I am back.
Yeah.
um, and if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Um, Lorraine, I know you have a brilliant new course come out, which is part of the Nano Tips on LinkedIn Learning. It's called Nano Tips for Resilient Communications. I wanted to quickly talk about this, and that I think that taking that course will definitely help on this optimizing professional presence journey that people might be going on. Could you give us a little bit of a summary of the course and why should people take it?
Sure. Yeah. So the course launched maybe a week ago now, a few days ago. So it's very new, hot off the press. Yeah. So now just for resilient communication, it covers a lot of different situations that we experience at work, both maybe smaller things, but also bigger things. So sharing
Mm,
difficult news like a layoff, like I mentioned before, but also, communication is such a key part of everyone's job at work.
yeah.
To be a strong communicator is one of the best skills that can help you stand out. So, communicating is not always easy though. When we have to speak on the fly, when we get asked a question and we don't know the answer, when we have to, share difficult news with someone. There's a lot of different situations at work that, of course, require communication, but can be more difficult to tackle. So, this
Mm.
course, 10 minutes or less and free, is meant to help you with some of those more difficult situations and provide some frameworks and scripts that you can follow to help.
Yeah, fantastic. And what I love about the Nano courses is they're, 10 minutes or less. So you can watch it while you're traveling to work. You can watch it while doing the dishes.
Yeah,
If you put your phone on the side, so it doesn't take too much of your time, but it's full of tips and tricks and frameworks that can help people along that journey.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I think that's awesome. Um, well, I think that is brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lorraine. I
Thank
really enjoyed
you.
this conversation. If people wanted to get hold of you, what is the best place that they reach out to?
Yes. So you can all follow me on LinkedIn, of course. I also have a weekly newsletter that you can subscribe to here. So it's called Career Bites, and it is bite-sized tips to supercharge your career in 3 minutes or less. So that's every week if you're interested. And then just to learn more about me, LorraineKlee.com.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, we're both on LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning. If you guys wanted to check out some of our courses, we'll drop some of those links below. Hopefully, they will help you. You'll find those courses useful and interesting. And of course, we're always interested in feedback. So if there's anything that we haven't spoken about, or you'd like us to talk about in the future, please drop that in the comments, and we'll make sure we include it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate your time because I know this is one of scarcest commodity these days, time and attention. And I appreciate Lorraine's time. Thank you so much, Lorraine, for spending this time with us here on LinkedIn Live Office Hours. Thanks, everyone.
So much. Bye.
Bye.